everybody. Welcome to Side Chicks. I hope everyone's having a good night. I am missing my partner in crime. I'm not. She will be joining us shortly, and but we didn't want to keep anybody waiting. And we have an amazing guest tonight. So I was thinking that we would jump right in, and then when Debra joins us, we'll just continue going. So, so yes, let's bring on Lisa Smartt. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Michelle. Hi there.
So, Lisa and I met many years ago when I was working with Art Bell, and I was just doing a lot of research, and I wanted to do something a little different than near-death experiences because, you know, a lot of people, there was a lot of buzz about it. There was so much going on about it. And so I just was digging in deep, and I found Dr. Raymond Moody, who he coined the term near-death experience, which is very cool. And Lisa started working on a special project with her. So she, oh, my phones are going off, guys. And so she, I really, you know, we have your bio and everything in the description, but I really wanted to jump in and kind of ask you what prompted you to start working with Dr. Raymond Moody?
Wow. Just a lot of great coincidences. It began with my father, who died pretty quickly from cancer over a 3-week period. Excuse me. I'm sorry. And as he was dying, I just became really surprised and stunned by what I heard come from his mouth, what he said to me, what he shared with me about what he saw. And I have a degree in linguistics. I went to UC Berkeley. I knew a lot about language. So I just very naturally just started writing down everything he said as he was dying. And he was talking about angels in the room. And my father was a complete skeptic. So to hear him talk about angels blew me away. And he just had very poetic language that intrigued me. And then 3 days before he died, he announced that the angels told him there were only 3 days left. And indeed, 3 days after he told me that, he passed away. So I became very intrigued by this whole kind of passage I witnessed over a 3-week period. Before then, I had no interest in death or dying. It seemed kind of creepy and icky to me. But I became really intrigued by the language of end of life. And then very coincidentally, my father lived in Berkeley, and I went to UC Berkeley. So right after he passed, I went up to the linguistics department looking for books and articles about final words, and I found nothing. There was tons of stuff about language acquisition, about the things people, how young kids learn language, but there was nothing about the unraveling of language. So then I became kind of obsessed, and I started reading everything I could. And one of the things I reread was Raymond Moody's Life After Life. And very coincidentally, I was at Temple just a couple months after my dad died. And one of my mother's friends came up to me and said, how are you doing with the loss of your dad and so forth? And I was obviously sad about it, had a lot of grief. And then I said, but I'm doing research into final words because my dad blew me away. He was such a skeptic, and he started talking about angels. And this person said, oh, wow, then you might be interested in a workshop I'm co-teaching in Alabama. And I said, oh, and he said, yeah, I'm co-teaching a class with Raymond Moody. And I went, you're kidding.
What?
Yeah, what? But it was like $2,500, and I was just like basically a special ed school teacher at that time, I was actually running a literacy program. So I was involved in some education. I did not have a lot of money, as many educators don't. So that $2,500 price tag, I wasn't sure if I could do it. And guess what happened? 2 days later, I got my tax refund. And I took that as a nod from the universe. I think it was
Oh my gosh.
crazy, right? It was like for $1,925 or something. So, I could do it. So I thought, what the hell? And so I jumped on a plane and set out to Alabama and uh, and met Raymond Moody. It was a 5-day seminar in the Alabama. He lived in Alabama at the time. And it was this incredible 5-day seminar. And day 4, he said, I'm looking for someone with a background in linguistics who might be interested in researching final words sometime, and I was like, holy moly. Oh my God, that's me. And I was so excited. There were about 15 people in the seminar. It was really intimate. We all got to know each other, well, and just Raymond and I had a very instant connection. Many people don't know that not only does he have an MD and is he a psychiatrist and have that MD degree, but he also has another PhD in philosophy. And one of the things he was really interested in was nonsensical language.
Right.
And so anyway, so that we had an instant connection. We had a lot to talk about together. We both shared this crazy obsession for final words. And then I took one of the biggest steps of my life, kind of jumping off the cliff. I had a very secure job, even though it didn't pay lots of money. It was a good job in California. And I had a very wonderful husband who said, hey, you got to follow your heart. And my heart was to move to the Southeast. I moved close to Raymond. And we started researching final words. And my daughter, who was older, just stayed in California and went and started college. And I was off to research final words and establish the Final Words Project with my mentor, an incredible, one of the nation's jewels, Dr. Raymond Moody, a really remarkable man.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm also, before we go on to like billions of other things, I'm very interested in this kind of all these synchronicities that you experienced at the time. Were you aware that this was happening, or did you feel like it was something that you manifested, or was it something that just kind of fell in your lap kind of thing? How did, and at that time, were you kind of looking at the world in a spiritual way at that point?
I think I was just beginning to look at the world in a spiritual way. But mostly, I've been a writer since I was really young. And I've had this experience that the books find you, and so I was always, my spirituality was very much connected to my writing. So, when a book idea came to me, I would throw myself into it and be passionate about it. And so when this whole final words idea came into my life, and then these synchronicities, for me, it was it was spiritual, but more in the sense of, this is the book that's trying to find me. This book is looking for me almost. And I do have that sense. I've written several books, and all of them I've had that sense that, the book has its own life, and the book, ideas are looking for the people to kind of embody and write them. So I did have that feeling kind of spiritually. Yeah, but that's a great question. Yes, I did. I felt it, but my more expanded and developed sense of spirituality. Like, I didn't really believe in the afterlife then, really.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so the more expanded spirituality came after, actually doing the research. But at the time, it was more like, for me as a writer, like, this idea has found me, and
Mm,
and it's almost like the muse. Like, I like the idea of the muse. It's like
yeah,
the muse found me and was pushing me along to pursue this idea. And so,
yeah. I really, and I talk to my kids all the time about this, idea of, and I think they're very close together, synchronicities
Mm.
and manifesting. I think, they are a kind of connection. And so my oldest son always thinks I have fairy magic, because like all these things just happen, or fall in my lap, or opportunities. And I'm like, no, it's not just me. It's, you have to be paying attention to, you put it out there, and then just like the money came to you, it's like you didn't, in a structured way, write down, I see myself with $2,500, but there was this kind of feeling that got put out, and it was answered like that. So I mean, of course, it's really nice to sit down and set an intention, but I also think that intention kind of happens without language. It's just like, like it just comes out, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and to me, it's almost like there's this feeling of co-creation, and I have this even more now, but I do believe that we sort of co-create our lives in a certain way with some kind of higher power. And I mean, I didn't believe this then, but I do now. But
Yeah.
it's almost as if when we are on track doing what we're meant to do on this life, that the angels or the ancestors or just the universe, however you want to map it, there are many
Right.
ways to map it, that when you're really doing what you're meant to do and you open up your heart and you have passion about it, things, they'll come to you. Now, when I did this final words project, I mean, there were lots of obstacles. Oh my God, so many. And it's not that, when we set our intentions and we're on path and we have the passion and we're open to the passion and we go for it, stuff still happens. It's not like, it's sort of like falling in love. You might
Yeah.
find the right partner, but you're still going to have fights and, bad days together. So, but I do feel there's this kind of magic, and there is something about just saying things
Yeah.
and believing it's possible. I mean, in some ways, I have always had this very innocent sense about we can have the lives that we want, especially for those of us who are relatively privileged, that were able to go to school or college, so yeah, I do believe that we can create and make our dreams come true, but we got to be ready to work. We got to be ready for disappointment.
Yeah.
We got to be ready to jump on that airplane when the $2,100 comes. So,
Exactly.
you got to put some boots on to,
Yeah, get ready to go. So my other half is here. Yay.
Oh, yay.
Yes. I felt so lost without you.
Oh my gosh.
Are you okay?
Oh yes. When we talked earlier, I said, what time are we meeting? And is it 6? And you said, yeah.
No, I
So
said 5. I said 5.
No, I said, is it 6? And you said, yes. I know you said yes. But anyway, and before I came on here, I'm like, okay, do we privately discuss that? I thought it was 6 and you thought it was 5, or do we let the whole world hear us argue if it was
Argue
4 or
about,
6?
yeah. No, I said 5. I for sure said 5.
Yes. Well, we know your fairy math, so
That's true. I do practice fairy math.
but regardless, we won't fight in front of our guest. We'll wait till later.
Yeah, but Henry wants us to fight. I'm seeing him in the chat. He's like, fight. I'm like, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
I left my boxing gloves at home. Darn.
I love it. So I'm so excited that you're here, because I did a little tease to everybody about a little experiment that you did, and I was hoping that we could talk about. Are you feeling comfortable to talk about your little experiment?
Yeah, we can do that maybe a little later, because I'm so excited to hear what Lisa has to say and all her examples about when people are passing over. I've been so excited to hear about that. But yeah, can we do that now, or do you want to do that later?
No, go ahead. Yeah. So we were just talking about like some synchronicities and just how Lisa, her first time meeting Dr. Moody and all these synchronicities that led her to end up working with him, we didn't start talking about what the Final Words Project really is about and her kind of path. So that's where I was stalling. I'm just going to completely stalling because I know you have like amazing good questions. So anyway, so Debra, this is Lisa. Lisa, this is Debra.
Hi. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for
Good to meet you. Glad you're here.
So how many people did you investigate for your project?
For the first, for my book, we had 100, but there were 2,000. I'm trying to remember. Oh, this is embarrassing to get the exact. I believe we had 2,000 utterances. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember now because we've gotten so many. Now we have over 2,000 now because the original research was back in 2000. By the time the book was published, it was 2017. So that's why I can't remember the exact number back in 2017. But I think now I know we have well over 2,000 because people are still, and that's utterances. That's not cases. But the exact number of cases, I have it. I'm sorry, I have it in my spreadsheet.
No problem, but that's a lot.
It's a lot.
And then in addition, tell us a little bit about your setup and how you conducted your study first, and then you could go into your findings.
Yeah, it was definitely informal research, and I say that in the book. And it was a really difficult thing to set up ethically because we investigated the idea of putting little digital tape recorders next to people who are dying. But, we know that a lot of deathbed conversations are confessional. People are saying things. And when we really thought about it, matter of fact, my grandmother, right before she died, she called me over to her bed. Actually, each of my grandmothers did something different, just as an example. One called me over and she says, Lisa, I've got something I got to tell you that this is a secret I've told nobody. And I was like, what happened? Did she have an affair? Did she have another child? I was thinking, what's the big story? Did she rob a bank? And I said, what is it, grandmother? She said, you can't tell anyone. Of course, I'm on a podcast now telling everybody. But anyway, you can't tell anyone, but I had my eyes done. Right? That was like the big confessional. But for her, that was really important, and that I heard that. And so if I had a recorder, she may have never told me that, right? Or my other grandmother who said, Lisa, you can't tell anybody, you can't tell me, you're my favorite. You're my favorite of all the grandchildren. I'm like, oh, we had that really intimate moment where I was her favorite. And 6 months later, I was walking with my cousin who I adore. And she said, I feel kind of embarrassed, but grandma told me I was her favorite. And we all laughed because, of course, grandma told every single one of us cousins. But it was true, right? For her, we each were her favorite. So the reason I'm mentioning that about the ethical, those last conversations are so precious. So we realized that having a recorder was, the whole idea with any kind of scientific investigation, you don't want to affect the thing you're studying, right? I mean, it happens all the time to some degree, right? But we want it to be as unintrusive as possible. So what we came upon, and actually turned out to be sort of a healing modality as well as an investigative one. One was just people just told us, reported. But the other thing we did in a lot of cases, we would put a journal next, or like a book right near the bed. And as people came in and talked to the loved one, they just tracked what they heard that day. And that turned out to be a really nice thing because when they felt something was private or they didn't want to go in, they would just put down the pencil, by anyone would say that was not, pure research. We really just wanted to begin. This is really a pilot investigation. So anyway, so that's how that's one of the ways we did it with logs. We talked to hospice nurses, doctors, just a variety of ways. Canada and the United States were the two main. Right now, it's predominantly English speaking. We've gotten now samples from other countries.
And that sounds really valid. Most qualitative studies, they're having people report from memory, and most aren't like going according, or maybe not most, but a lot of them are going off of people's memories and experiences, and that sounds like the next best way you could have studied that.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's such a delicate
Yeah.
time. Now there is research going on, it has gone on at the center. It's in Buffalo, New York. It's palliative care. Again, I don't have the name in front of me, but they videotaped everything. They videotaped 500, and what they were looking at was visitations at end of life. And they were able to get support to do that, to videotape. But they had to go through, it was a team of doctors who, had to fight for years to get,
That would be really hard. Do you know, did they capture anything on video as far as?
Yes, incredible research. Dr. Christopher Kerr, and he also actually has a TED Talk, and he's terrific. But their main focus was on visitors before end of life, and the number was 72 in their initial research. And again, hundreds of people, who 72, and then went up to 80% in a second study they did of these what they call takeaway figures. So as someone is dying, they'll have a mother, a brother, a sister, a lover, a spouse, sometimes a religious figure, sometimes a big bunny rabbit. But somebody will come to the bedside and say, it's time for you to go, and I'm going to take you away, take you with me. And this whole idea of having visitors or visitation shows up in the Final Words Project, where people will say, oh my God, it's Earl. And the daughter or the son may say, what? It's your dad. He's here. And so when you see, and even on WebMD, which is a pretty traditional website for doctors, they have reported now this is a very clear indicator that someone's close to dying is when they start seeing these takeaway figures. And we definitely see it in the Final Words research. So, this idea that people come as we die, the ones we love, come to our bedside. And there are so many cases where there's sort of this flash of kind of lightness, or even people reaching up to take someone's hand. So, when I saw case after case of that, it really, I was telling Michelle, I did not necessarily believe in an afterlife at all. But when you see case after case of these visitations, and they got them on video, and it would be in their dreams as well as in their waking self. And that showed up in the Final Words Project as well. But anyway, I went off track in terms of your original question.
Sorry. I have a question. I think you kind of answered it, but something that was driving me crazy. When my father passed away, I was with him, and his final words were goodbye. He said goodbye. And I would have expected my dad to say, I love you, and, whatever, but I found it very interesting that it was goodbye. And how it happened was he smiled, a tear came out, and then he said goodbye. And then he kind of turned his head, and then he passed. And I have been wondering and racking my bed, like, how did he know that to say goodbye and then he was going to leave? Do you know, like that? Do you have any kind of answer or something about that?
No, but I can tell you that an incredibly high percentage of people know when it's goodbye. And that's what's so remarkable. And even I was mentioning earlier with my father, where he said 3 days left. 3 days left. The angels tell me 3 days left. And indeed, 3 days later, he passed on. People really seem to know, whether it's, minutes from the time they're going to die, or days, and even weeks, sometimes even months, people have a sense that they're going to die. So yeah, it's very remarkable. We do seem to have a very strong internal sense about when we're going to die. And, there seems to be very much
so like perfect. Like, it was just like as if someone went, okay, come on, okay, bye. And then you go. And
Well,
I've just always wondered about that. But yeah.
Maybe he was really, already like he was in the process. Like he was like halfway out the door and he could see he was halfway out the door,
Yeah. Yeah. It
So
could
it wasn't
be
even just predicting it. It was he's
he meant
saying
it.
goodbye over his shoulder because he was already
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I learned, because I would, I analyze why was goodbye. I'm sure you analyze like a lot, Lisa, but I was analyzing goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. And then it hit me that my dad has never said goodbye in our whole life. He would say, see you later or whatever. And he was also always telling me, Michelle, we only have so many words in a lifetime, and you need to choose your words wisely
wow.
and say what you mean. And just sitting and pondering and ruminating about why he said goodbye turns out to be one of the biggest lessons of my life. And it's true. It's true. It's like I want to be sure that I'm always saying, what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think,
well. He may his whole life avoided goodbye because he knew he was saving that for
Mm,
the time when it really was goodbye.
mhm.
right.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. That's
yeah,
pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, that there is this kind of native intelligence we all seem to have about how we're going to die and how we're going to live. I mean, uh, many times, at least the words people say are very connected to the way they lived, which, we can talk about more too later.
yeah, yeah. Give us some more examples. Or what are the top? Like, could you say the top 10 types of things that people say when they're dying?
Well, one main thing that happens, I'm going to get my list of words so I have things and I'm accurate. But one of the most common things is people really move into a more metaphorical kind of reality in a metaphorical space. And the first is this whole idea of the momentous occasion or the big moment. So people will announce like, oh, I got to get ready for the big dance, or I've just been invited as a fourth for golf. There are three guys playing golf, and I'm going to be the fourth. But the things that people talk about that big occasion are usually like I'm not going to talk about golf when I leave. That's not the metaphor I'm going to use because I don't play golf. But I might say, help me get ready for the big party or the big ball tonight. I'm going to go dancing. So one of the things that people announce that this big event is coming, and that they need help with it, and that's one of the signs that death is approaching. But they do it in metaphoric, and I call them signature metaphors. The metaphors that are really close. So there was a dance choreographer, Jeffrey Holder. And let me make sure I get his name right. I'm pretty sure that is correct.
You're like throwing the papers.
I know. I have all these papers around me.
Okay.
But Jeffrey Holder said, as he was dying, arms 2, 3, 4, turn 2, 3, 4, down 2, 3, 4. So you hear those kinds of final words, whereas again, the guy who was the golfer would probably not have used those same kinds of metaphors and terms. One story that I really loved from one of the participants in the Final Words Project, her father was a contractor his whole life, and he was really close to dying, and she was like, how you doing, Daddy? How you doing? He said, oh, I'm good. There's so many kitchenettes, so many bathrooms, so many remodels. And he said there's lots of remodels on the other, so people start talking about metaphors, but very, very closely connected to them.
But
And then,
can I interrupt you there?
Oh, please.
So would that be an assumption that it's a metaphor? Because it could really be literal, that they're all going to the places that they want to go to, and they're also paying attention. Maybe there's all a bunch of kitchenettes, but just that one guy who does remodels himself would talk about that. the other guy is seen like his spirit's going right to wherever he'd want to, like a dance party or a performance or to golf.
I love that idea. You know, I love the idea that as I'm dying, if I'd say, get me my, you know, my purple dress, I'm going to the big dance. I'm actually am going to go to the big dance, you know, and
There.
you know, that's a really beautiful idea. You know, when I was coming through it, I was just coming in looking at the metaphors as a linguist and a person, you know, who studied language. But really, as I was telling Michelle, just through doing this work, I became more expanded in my own spiritual ideas. And right now, that's a lovely idea that they're not metaphors, you know. And I could really, yeah, that's beautiful. I'll buy that.
What about religion? Does that kind of also, you know, play a part in this?
Yeah, it plays a part in many ways because, you know, I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but we could come back. We know in the near-death experience, people talk about encountering a light, a being of light on the other side. And that's part of what, you know, going through what we call the life review as people are, you know, reviewing their lives and so forth. You know, but who you see during the life review, some people see the light, some people will see a God, you know, their idea of God, you know, who people see is very much through the filter of what their experiences of God. Do you know what I mean? You know, if you have a Buddha. So well, again, I'm going to give an example from my personal life. Again, my mother, who was a complete atheist, didn't believe in any kind of God at all. As she was dying, she said, Lisa, I think I saw God. And I'm like, really, Mom? That's so cool. And she said, yeah, and we got along quite well. And I'm like, that's awesome. And I said, tell me what God was like. She said, well, he's like this little old guy. He wore like a mustard colored sweater like your father. And he said his name was Herb. You know, so for her, I'm like, that's great.
Herb,
Herb. What
of
the
all
heck?
the names.
But you know, other people will see, you know, Christ, right? Some people see Christ at the bedside. Not that often, not as often as I would have expected. People don't see the traditional religious figures that you might expect, but some people do, and some people talk about it. So I think it's very much depends. Everyone in the near-death experience, and even as they're dying, there's a sense that there's a light. And there's also a sense that the room gets crowded with presences. People talk a lot about the crowded room they're in. But there's, and I have been surprised how little reference there is to very specific religious figures. Do you know what I mean? It's, yeah. So
They're not all seeing Jesus right at that
they're
moment.
not all seeing Jesus, but they're also not against that image either. You know, it's, yeah.
Yeah. What else do they say?
All right. Well, they talk about the big trip that's coming up. And some people say, I need my passport. I got to get my passport. Some people will say, my car, I need my Jetta. One nurse I spoke to just gave one example of a patient who was like, Jetta, I need my Jetta. And the wife was, what the F is he talking about? Get my Jetta. And so the nurse was like, Jetta, that's a car, kind of car. And so the nurse came and said, you know, Mr. Rogers, I'm going to get the Jetta all gassed up for you, and it'll be ready to go as, you know, in just a few minutes. And indeed, the next, I think like a day or so later, he passed on. So there'll be a lot of metaphors about travel. And it's really important for those of us who have loved ones who are dying to just completely like, yeah, we're going to get your passport. We're putting everything in. And and you hear people talking about planes and trains, a lot of stuff that seems like total nonsense, but packing up their bags. So travel and the metaphors associated with travel become very prevalent.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. And it's so consistent, even across languages. As we've gotten other samples from languages, it's showing up in other languages as well. So it's kind of interesting.
Are there any gender differences of what people say?
we hadn't really gone much into that.
Or maybe age differences. Like have you studied across the spectrum of ages, or is it mostly older people?
It's mostly older, but we did have children. And children, what's so interesting is children so often were reassuring their parents. Like, it's okay, mommy, it's beautiful here. It's, giving their parents, oh, mommy, I see a ladder going up to heaven from my bed. So the children oftentimes came with messages of reassurance. Let me see again.
That's really interesting.
Okay, I like this story I want to make. Soon after Joanne's passing, my daughter pointed to the bedroom ceiling and said, Mommy, look at all the birds. The next night, my daughter slept with me, and then in the middle of the night, there was a big thud as she fell into the floor. This was very unusual and woke me up with a start. I asked her what happened, and she told me, I saw Jijo on a ladder, and she was on the top, and I wanted to go with her.
Wow.
And she said, no, honey, not yet. You've got to go back down. So kids seem to, adults too, but the kids seem to be really tuned in more. And then there were several stories of how the kids were like, it's okay, Mom, it's okay.
Wow. Do you have any other examples you could read to us?
And see, this is more about how kids seem to be really tuned in to that other kind of language. I'll read. Another person described a moment when his 2-year-old niece sat on the bed with his dying grandmother. They were face to face, eye to eye, and both spoke babbling nonsense to each other as if they were like in rapport. I remember watching in awe as they spoke with these waves of sounds, and they both seemed to understand. So that to me was just kind of another reflection of how kids seem to be tuned into, as the grandfather was passing and speaking nonsense, there was like this shared language that was not quite of this world.
Wow, that's so incredible.
Yeah, it really is incredible to me as I gathered these stories.
Yeah. And what did you take away from it all personally for yourself?
Oh, wow. Well, let me share one more example of things that's really important. Is that one of the things that really shifted my ideas about how the mind works and how spirit works was something that I call sustained narratives. And one of the things that was really common was people would tell a story over a period of time. So they might 3 weeks before dying just say something like, there's a problem with the train station. The conductor is not happy. And you're like, oh God, grandpa's just out of his mind, right? And the next day it's like, conductor happy, but when you're writing this stuff down, you have a log of all the things that people are saying. So what would happen is there would be these like what seemed like random things saying, but when you looked at them all together, there was a story, because the conductor, but we're fixing the tracks. Now I'm going onto the platform. I've got my suitcase. So every day there'd like be a piece of the puzzle of the story, and it all led to this train coming to take them home. And that's another thing. One of the most common things we hear is the word home. I'm going home. I'm going home.
Yeah.
I'm going home. And just like people have this sense of death, of knowing when they're going to die, they also have this very strong sense that where they're going is home. That's very common too. But that idea of a sustained narrative where someone is like telling a story over a period of time, and that came up a fair amount in the research, that was the one thing that made me think, look, this is a dying brain, so it shouldn't be able to track a story over 3.
Right.
Like, could you tell me a story over 3 weeks like that? You know what I mean? That's amazing. How does that happen? So that was like, my goodness, that's like there's some kind of consciousness that's bigger than our cognition to track that. So that was one of the things that really made me think that consciousness continues and that there is such a thing as consciousness. And then there's something else called terminal lucidity. Because when you're asking me what were my conclusions
Yeah.
about research, I wanted to give you some examples of things
Sure.
that led to my conclusions.
Yeah.
There's something else called terminal lucidity, where someone could be even in a coma or like completely not lucid or not responsive, and you think they're gone. You know, they're not there. And then for this very short window of time, they'll come up and be completely lucid, and say things like, well, in one case, this woman came out of a coma and just looked at her son and said, "It's not what you think. It's not what you think." And then went back and then died like the next day. Or more lucidity, someone might come up and say, "I want a beer. Get me a beer." And I've never told you how much I loved you. And maybe even talk for an hour. But there's like this window of time where you think someone's totally gone and they come back. And oftentimes it's associated with food. Someone will get ask for their last favorite food and say some things. And they're usually words of reconciliation or some kind of forgiveness. And the other thing is, the most dramatic story of that is this guy, John, who I worked with. So I knew this was totally credible because I knew him really well. His mother had Alzheimer's. They hadn't had really a coherent conversation in years. And then she fell into a coma. I mean, she was by any accounts completely gone, right? Cognitively. And about a week, several days to a week before she died, she got up, she looked at him, said, "John, my financial files are in the third drawer down in my study." She gave detailed explanation, and they all turned out to be absolutely true. And then she passed on like 2 days later. Now, how do you explain that kind of lucidity without there being consciousness? The final thing, since you asked me, I couldn't help it.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But the other thing that really, really convinced me is the research of Kenneth Ring and Sharon Cooper, in which they looked at 38 people who were blind. And when they had near-death experiences, all of them, to some degree, were able to see themselves below. And that, again, sort of just fed into the research I did about if someone who's blind can see in a near-death experience, and what the heck is that?
Yeah.
What is that? And Kenneth Ring called that transcendental awareness, that there was some kind of awareness that was transcendental, and that's consciousness. So a lot of the final words, I didn't expect this when I started the final words. I started as a curious linguist, but it really led me to think that there's some kind of consciousness that continues.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What has changed for you after your research? So how you changed before and how you feel now?
Well, one of the things I haven't spoken about that much yet is this notion of nonsense. And it really came from my work with Dr. Moody, because Moody explained to me that, when people had near-death experiences and they came back and shared with doctors about their near-death experiences, people at first thought it was nonsense, right? They defined it as nonsense.
Right.
And so, all the things I'd say, like, "I went through this tunnel when I was dead," or, people would say things, "I've never felt as alive as when I was dead." And doctors would be like, "Yeah, right. Like, this guy's really crazy," right? But Raymond, because he was intrigued by nonsense, like he loved, Lewis Carroll and Dr. Seuss, and he was intrigued by nonsense. When people came back with this nonsense language, he wrote it down, all the nonsense that they talked about with near-death experiences. And the thing about that Raymond taught me that I really believe in, and my belief in this has deepened as someone with a background in linguistics, nonsense is as much a part of human communication as sense is. Because what often seems like nonsense becomes a harbinger for sense. Like, for example, if I said ATM to you, 100 years ago, you would be like, what the heck is an ATM? But in the context of what we know, of course, it makes sense, right? So going back to Raymond, he believed that we should listen to the nonsense people say and try to understand it and and allow it to be there, kind of thing. So that's how the near death experience, he started really listening. And then I'll be darned, these things that were nonsense, one case at a time, all of a sudden there were patterns because all these people had the same darn nonsense. And so that really excited me about this idea of what's nonsense and not nonsense. So in the words of the threshold, or the words as people are dying, when you start putting into categories the kinds of things they're saying, then you go, is this really nonsense if they're falling into certain patterns?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a good point. And, we may tend to do that with other people who talk about things we haven't experienced altogether, but especially when it comes to people that have dementia or they're on heavily medicated, it's just so easy to want to dismiss what they're saying. Maybe if we flip that around and think, okay, any second, an incredible word of wisdom might come out of their mouths, maybe we would hear a lot more.
Right. And that's what I really encourage people and to go into, those last weeks, days of someone's life with this sense that perhaps it all makes sense, or perhaps there's a word, rather than fear, which most people fear, or like, oh, daddy, shut up, you're not making sense, right? But, walking with this sense of wonder and curiosity, and also that we don't know everything. We don't know what people, like you said, maybe they are at a dance. Maybe they are doing carpentry on the other side. Who am I to say, really? And to sort of enter into that space. And, it's really hard with people with dementia. It's, it really is, because, you're looking for that connecting point and it's hard. But, with our kids, we often allow them to say nonsense. Most of us, I hope, encourage their imagination and their nonsense. And so anyway, that's one of the many things about nonsense. And then, there's so much more, but I don't want to just ramble on if you have more to ask or say.
No, that's such a good point. Like, why do we just think it's so cute and interesting when kids are just, going off with imaginations and playing and everything? Why can't we have that same attitude with really anybody, at any age? But yeah, Michelle, did you want to ask her something at this point?
No, I didn't. No,
Yeah.
I was just listening. I'm like, part of this is so mesmerizing, and I guess one thing, since you did give me the mic, is the lesson that all of us can learn is really to not be so fearful of death. That's kind of what I'm, putting myself in that environment as one of the caretakers in there, and kind of imagining that if you hear this over and over, that maybe my idea of death would not be something fearful. Not something that I'm ready to experience yet, but, and I also like the idea that you said about everybody saying like going home. Everybody feel like everybody's looking for that feeling, like it feels like home. Like you can meet people and you say you feel like home. And so we're all striving to find that. And so if all these people are talking about it in that reference of home, that's very nice.
Yeah, because it could be so different. Like, imagine if there really was just a nothingness. Like, people might be, yelling out, like, I don't want to leave here, like it could be completely different. Like, they could be terrified, horrified. And I know a lot of times, before the final moments, a lot of people are really scared. So the fact that's not just continuing and even escalating in that fear, but there's this sudden switch, that's pretty convincing.
Yeah, I think you're making a really good point. Yeah, because I don't want to sugarcoat death at all. I mean, it is scary to a lot of people and it's painful to a lot of people. And, it's kind of like birth, which is not pretty if you've ever been in a room with someone when they're, giving birth. But
Ourselves.
what was that?
Ourselves when, we were giving birth, like, I know for me, I was just like, no, I don't want to do this. Like, I changed my mind. I'm not
I know.
this. It's like the idea that you have no choice. There's not that many things in life where you just can't stop it. Like, you have to go through it no matter what.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But
And
sorry, continue
no,
with.
but it is. I mean, it's very scary. And I think, we're animals as well as spiritual beings, right? I mean, we're both. And of course we feel fear. And one of the things that I've noticed is that people there seems to be this breakthrough point, kind of what I heard you say. There is fear. Really, with most people, they go through like these anxiety, but then something seems to happen in their dream world, or they'll start seeing visitation, and people who are skeptics will say, well, that's just the mind's way to make it easier to transition. But, for me, the stories of like sustained narratives, or my father knowing 3 days before he was going to die, or, all these kinds of things really feel to me like there is something on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that argument that, well, it's just the brain trying to make them feel better. Well, in other situations where people have high anxiety, a lot of times they don't feel better. They just have to go through whatever they go through. It's not like every situation, right, when you get there, right? Like before you go to court or before you have your baby or whatever it is. It's like, no, a lot of people, it just keeps going up and up until the whole thing's over. So, yeah, again, to see that go dramatically down at the end, that's telling us something.
Yeah, no, it is. And yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah, what else would you like to share from your study or your findings?
yeah, let me see. Well, the other thing that I thought was really interesting is something that I call non-referential language. And let me give you some examples. And then, again, I'm going to start with an example from my father and then give some other ones. So while my father was very close to dying, about 3 days away, he had a secretary who called to check in on him. And he said, Alice, this is very interesting. I've never done this before. And it really intrigued me. So the word this is called non-referential. Like you're not too sure what it's referring to. And I remember when he said that, I was so curious, like, is he talking about this being dying? Or is there like some other this going on? That's like amazing. So, it's very common to hear so let me use some examples. It's very beautiful over there. It is there. Where's the there? That's a common thing we've heard from people. It's very beautiful over there. Too bad I cannot tell you of all of this. What's the this? I think I told you this one. It's not what you think. Or poet Jack Spicer said, my vocabulary did this to me. This one, a mother said to her daughter, I don't know whether the far away goes anywhere, but I use it so much. I feel like it's dirtiest raindrop I could find. I feel like it's the dirtiest raindrop. When that's so, this whole idea of the non-referential language is really, really interesting. And if I could rewrite time and be there with my father, I would have said, what's the this, Daddy?
Yeah.
What's the this? But that's very common. And there are different types of nonsense. So let me go through some of those with you. One is just what I call, no, I think I'm going to start here. I beg your pardon. So one that's really common is prepositional nonsense, because people start talking about their place in space in unusual ways. So for example, I got to get down there. I have to go down. I've got to get down to earth. Help me. I'm on top now, moving on top. I'm crossing up. I've got to get off of this life. I'm dying. So people talk a lot about space in really unusual ways. And if you've been a student of near-death experiences, some of it really makes sense because people literally are like, help me come back down to earth, get me down. Some people talk about going forward or backwards. Oh, I'm going back, when they're actually as still as can be. They're just lying there, but they're saying, I'm moving backwards.
That's really
Isn't
interesting.
that interesting? There was a lot of prepositional nonsense.
What do you know? Was there more backwards than forwards, or more ups than downs?
More ups and downs. Definitely more. More ups and downs, and more. The whole backwards forwards was less common.
And did anyone go sideways?
One person, actually, and I remember that because I was like, oh my God, yeah. But no, usually it's up and down, backwards, forwards.
Down is not favorable. I don't want to be going down.
Do they have a sense of change of size? Like, do they ever say they're getting bigger or smaller?
Well, there was one person that kind of puts these two questions together, which was really strong. The boyfriend said to the girlfriend as he was dying, help me down the rabbit hole. Help me come down the rabbit hole. So for him, that sense of the other world or something was actually going down rather than going up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And were there anyone who really got very specific about what they were observing, like what it was like over there?
Oh yeah, let's see. Let me see. It's wonderful here. Here's another. I have paper all around me. There's so many phrases, it's hard to remember them. It's wonderful here. I feel good. Don't be afraid. I'm not afraid. And people talked about the green dimension, seeing. Some people would look in their walls and see things, and describe green. Light. They hear people talk about hearing bells.
I noticed my mom kept looking up at this one direction all the time. Like her eyes kept going, and I kept going, what is she looking at? But it seemed like she was looking at something, but she was also really out of it. So it was really, I was like, what is going on? Did you notice anything like that?
That's very, very, very common, and probably hospice nurses could tell you more about why. But a lot of times, people looking at angels in the things in the seeing things up there that they can't quite verbalize. But that's very common, very close to dying. Very common. And before, I had mentioned this before, but a lot of people talk about this experience of the room they're in feeling full. Oh, there is. This is great. I'm just reading the thing on the screen.
Yeah. We have one of our people in our chat that has a story. Deb, do you want to read that?
Yeah. Hi, Diane. Good to see you. We missed you on the cruise last month. At the end of her life, after grappling with the reality of her morality and some amount of fuss, she told me, I am ready for my next assignment. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
And I did hear people actually say that is not as uncommon as you might think. I've heard reference from other people about that. Yeah. Her words. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
She's saying, Diane is saying her words, I think, reflected her lifelong curiosity and acceptance of the unknown, offering a profound perspective on embracing life's final translation. What do you think?
Yeah, I think she, so often the way we live helps us in how we die. And, having a spiritual perspective really helps us die, I think, more easily and gracefully and less fearfully. And it sounds like Diane's mother lived with this sense of curiosity and openness to the unknown. And, what better way to live every day of your life, and also for that big transition. And, Raymond talks a lot about the importance of philosophy in our lives, and Raymond Moody. And, the more we know spiritually about things, I think the more we can feel excited about the next assignment. And, as you said, maybe we're all doing stuff in the other, if there is, which I believe now, if there is indeed an afterlife, maybe we're busy doing all kinds of things over there. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm quite sure of it. So how about animals? Do people talk to their animals or talk about their animals? Did that come up a lot?
Yeah, people do. And as you may know already, animals seem to be very attuned to when their, I don't like the word masters, but their owners are very close to dying. They'll often, they'll do some kind of behavior to indicate they know they're, maybe they'll start barking or come closer and curl up. And just so animals really seem to be responsive to when their owners are dying. And there are people who have seen past pets. A couple people referred, as they were close to dying, seeing like the spirits of their, one person described their dog, Spreckles, going by as seeing Spreckles as they were close to dying. Yeah.
That's what you come up with, Spreckles.
He was talking about his Dalmatian, and that he saw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did any of them like talk about like past relationships, even though maybe like their wife was there, like their past girlfriend or lover, or like people from the past who maybe they wouldn't have talked about if, they were in a different state?
I think so. Let me really think on that. It's really interesting that when people are really at the very end, getting closer to the end, it's more like, well, there's so much variation, but there's less of that very kind of practical talking about. They might see people who had, for example, sometimes people don't know that someone else that they know are dying just at the same time as they're dying or close to. There are some really fascinating stories that were part of the Final Words Project, where someone was saying, hey, wait a minute, why am I seeing this person as a deceased figure as I'm dying? Why am I keep seeing this person? And this person just died and she didn't know it. Does that, so there are things like that where, but it's funny, people don't talk as they're approaching death. They'll talk about past relationships and things they might feel bad about, and forgiveness and all those kinds of things. But when they really reach that very close to dying period, it's not that conscious. Do you know what I mean? It's not
like a linear,
not like it's more like dreams. You know how
Yeah.
dreams are. You might see Michelle in your dream, but is it really Michelle, or is it symbolic of something else? Or so it's but as people approach their death, of course, in the months or weeks before, if they're able to have that time, then they might think back to a marriage that didn't go well, or something they did to their kids. And I think it's pretty universal. Most people are looking for some kind of healing, as they die. But it's a hard thing to do. People oftentimes don't get the full kind of healing or resolution they want. I remember one story of a father-in-law with his daughter-in-law, and he used to tease her about not being that pretty. Like the other daughter-in-law was very, very striking and beautiful, and she wasn't that pretty. And
geez, not very nice.
Yeah, well, people are not nice sometimes, right? They're not nice. And he used to tease her about not. Anyway, he was not nice. But she said that as he was dying, came through that terminal lucidity thing I told you about, where he kind of came through. And he said, oh my God, I never realized how beautiful you were. I'm so sorry. How could I have not? He said, I think it was something like, how could I have not seen it, or something? So, in that way, that was a relationship that had problems, that he was aiming for resolution, but it still wasn't that kind of really intellectual. It was like in the moment.
And maybe like he wasn't just saying that to make her feel better. Like maybe he saw her spirit or something,
Yeah.
that made her look different.
Yeah.
Wow.
We have a
Well,
question, another
yeah.
question there.
Yes, from Henry Gilroy. Hi, Henry. I'm really glad that you joined us here. We have our remote viewing friends here tonight.
Oh,
So Henry asked, are there any cases of other people at the moment of dying seeing other people in the room? So the people that are in the room.
Non-patients. He said he said non-patients.
So like the relatives in the room with the dying person, have they witnessed apparitions or seen spirits or anything in the room?
absolutely. And yeah, it's very common. It's called a shared death experience. If you're not familiar with the book Heaven's Door by William Peters, he's done extensive research into shared death experiences, and actually Raymond coined the term. But it happens really commonly. Again, I'm telling a lot of personal stories today, but I'm going to just share one more about my father. I was living in Napa at the time, and my dad was in Berkeley. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and I looked at the clock. It was 3:15, and I said to my husband, "God, I wonder if my dad's dying because I feel like there's like spirit or presence or something. The room feels crowded. You know that feeling when you can feel." And my husband characteristically said, "Go back to sleep. It's nothing. It's nothing." Well, the next day I went to Berkeley to see my dad, who was getting very close to dying. And I said to my mom, "How's dad?" And she said, "Well, it was really weird because he woke up at 3:15 in the morning and complained about how crowded the room was and how crowded it felt." But that kind of experience it's really common. And just as people are dying, sometimes family members will describe seeing a mist, or even see some people have described going through the life review with their loved ones. So there's a lot. It's really become more and more documented. Glimpses of Eternity by Paul Perry and Raymond Moody, and Heaven's Door by William Peters both go into a lot of depth. There are many categories of shared death experiences, and they're remarkable, and they're common.
And did you in your Many Words project find examples of that as well?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Not as much, but yes. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Michelle, any final questions?
We have another one up there.
Okay, Lucas asked, any really strange anomalous cases such as xenoglossy? Is that how you pronounce that? Xenoglossy. I don't even know what that is. Apparent telepathic communication or shared deathbed visions. And I'm going to look up that word because
I know. I was just thinking,
wow.
gotta look that one up.
So while I'm looking that word up, or maybe they could define it for us, it's great. Oh, when someone speaks a language they never learned. Thank you.
Oh, interesting.
That's going to be our word of the day. And are we pronouncing it right? Xenoglossy, is that right?
Yeah.
Lucas can tell us if we're not pronouncing it, but yeah, word of the day. So yeah, any really strange cases, shared deathbed visions, apparent telepathic communication, or speaking other languages they don't know.
I expected, to find maybe more xenoglossy. I was kind of hoping for that, just as a language person. And I was surprised I didn't. There was really nothing. I mean, there was nonsense where people kind of didn't make sense, but it didn't seem specifically to be a language. But there were several cases of people were speaking languages of their childhood that maybe they hadn't spoken for, decades. Yeah. Also language that is not from this time or even from this planet.
Did anyone seem like they were channeling someone else, like maybe not a different language, like where their eyes changed or like they suddenly look like somebody else?
Yeah, to some, but not a lot. But remember, many of these cases, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that's where, kind of the research for this is, we're just, this is just the beginning of the process, right? I love these questions and I'm really curious. And I did think that I would find more of it. But, remember, since family members were collecting this data, they may have been really scared if they heard this kind of stuff, or they may have thought, oh, this is complete nonsense. This is not what she wants. She wants, so this is why the research was so imperfect, because there might have been more spoken, because, I wasn't sitting there myself, except with my father and my mother.
Yeah.
So, that's the real imperfection of the design of the research right now. Ideally, it would be great to have asked Dr. Christopher Kerr, who I mentioned had done 500 people with video, because that's where we could, and I actually was going to partner with him and look at his videotape, and just life happened, and it's only been a couple of years. I spoke to him about joining their team. But if there's any linguists out there, people who are able, it might be really wonderful if he's still open to linguists looking at that, because we might see a lot more of these rich language possibilities that people have mentioned. I'm completely open to the possibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So he would actually share all his footage that he already shot with you to reanalyze.
Yeah, I think the way his consent forms with people, that it was going to allow for other researchers, but I can't remember. But he did seem open to it. So that would be great research to do. I'm not in a position in my life, for a variety of reasons, to do more research like that. But for people who would be, there's so much to be done. I mean, you can just tell by these questions.
Yeah. And, as these ideas come in, it's like any one of them, you could study all 500 of his videos just looking for each individual theme. So there's probably going to be decades of studies that could be done with what he collected. I really do hope that people get a chance to.
Yeah, and if I hope I'm not misspeaking, if that data is available, indeed, or future people, because if he was able to get the permission to videotape at least this group of people, so it seems like in the future we'd be able to do more.
Yeah.
Because who knows, like in the middle of the night, what people are saying. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I do believe there's other possibilities, indeed. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Lisa, what else are you working on? What other projects are you working on?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier in the show, a lot of I've been a writer my whole life, and my experience has always been is that books find me, and then I just and then I'll write the book I feel called to write. So, I have a musical that I wrote about power and what power is, that was inspired by studying martial arts, Aikido specifically, and just questions about power. That's called The Sensei's Wife. And so I'm working on that. And I'm also working on a book that was an experience where I felt like some energy from another place or time kind of contacted me. And it's called A Song Between Lives. And this was, at the time that this happened, I had not yet done my Words of the Threshold work. But one morning I woke up and this character, I always write in my journal, and this character said, "Hi, my name is Carlos Pena. I want you to tell my story." And I'm like, "Okay, Carlos, lay it on me." And he told me the story about being a flamenco singer. And anyway, he had this whole story, but he told me that he was caught between the worlds. And it was a whole story about him making up for his past sins. And he murdered 2 people. He just told me this whole story. So I ended up going to Spain for summer, and where I finished the whole novel. And I studied flamenco for that summer, so I could really write about flamenco. And at the time, I thought of it as a historical novel. I just thought this character, And I just wrote it like a historical novel. I didn't really think at the time that he was like a channeled, I wasn't thinking that way.
Yeah.
So anyway, that
Wow.
that novel.
How did that, can I ask you though, like, were you like just having these thoughts about it and the story just unfolded, or was it like you're hearing a voice or seeing stuff? How did you observe
Would
it?
you indulge me for a minute? Let's see. He just came to me and he said a couple things. He just came. Let me just read you what he said.
And after we hear this, then we can get to a couple more questions in the chat.
Yeah, he just said, I go because I must. I slip into the room and watch, but then I must take action. The body is no longer pink. There is the queasy gray that I know all too well, the blue slate of impending death. But he just came in and he just started telling me the story. I'm like, what the F? And I just wrote down everything. And so now I'm in the process. I wrote the novel, but I'm in the process of writing a screen treatment for it. And that's one of my dreams, because it was such a powerful story that this character brought to me. And it's kind of like the final words thing. Like, I feel like language may come to us and it's always a gift, whatever the language is. And we should follow whatever language it is to wherever it may want to take us. And
I still want to understand a little bit more though, when you say he came to you, like, were you already writing and then you just found yourself writing this down, or did you see images of him? How did the information come into
Good question. Even though I may not have quite believed in the afterlife, then I meditated every day just to be, I done that just to be mellow myself out a little bit. And I just wrote every day as a way to develop myself creatively. Again, at that time, I was thinking it more as being a writer and an artist versus being a spiritual person. And the meditation was more just for, just a very functional, being relaxed and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so he just one day, I'll never forget, he said, they call me tijeras, which means scissors in Spanish. They called me tijeras, and I would like you to tell my story. And I said, who are you? He said, my name is Carlos Peña. I want to tell you my story. And I'm like, okay, just go for it. And then it just came, and I just wrote about it. And then I went to Spain for a summer. I was really lucky. I was able to, actually put it all on credit cards. To tell you the truth, for the summer, because I was doing teaching and I taught anyway. So I went and studied flamenco, and then the character just came to me like I felt like there was a person standing next to me, and he was just telling me his story, and it was my job to listen and write. Wow. Because I felt like as a writer, that was my job. So
did you have a sense of why he hired you to be his novelist?
Because I'm cute and I got nice curls.
Let's see. Well, I lived in Mexico as a child, so I was really comfortable with Spanish. I have kind of a poetic soul, I think, and I think he knew that. And he's a very poetic character. I think I sometimes get the idea as a writer that characters are just looking for the person who will just like sit down and take the time. And I was like, okay, cool. You sound pretty cool. And I just gave myself to him for summer and was able to write most of the first draft then. And so that magic of words is the same thing I feel about end of life language, that there's something magical that's coming through, and we should have faith in what that language is.
And that's interesting too, that you were able to just write all that in one summer. Like, I think that's kind of a sign when you're really dialed in or channeling something, as opposed to if you had to just come up with all of those ideas yourself, it might not have unfolded like that. But
Thank you.
We have some questions here. Spiritual Psychic Podcast, which I recognize as Sarah Wiseman, who is a I've known Sarah for years. She was a fellow Llewellyn author, and she's published a lot of
Llewellyn. I love Llewellyn.
Yeah, and she she's a channeling teacher and automatic writing teacher. So she has some comments here. She says, and I might be missing some, but she says, well, we were talking earlier about asking with was it the xenoglossy? And then she had said something about a language that is not from this time or even from this planet, not nonsense, but another language. So there have been other languages coming through that maybe you didn't even recognize as a language for the people passing over, like when it, like the example of the older person and the 2-year-old both speaking what sounded like nonsense. Could that have really been an actual language?
Absolutely. Why not? Right? I mean, that, that's the kind of thing that has not at all been studied. That could be studied, and really the phonemes, someone could study that and see if there are patterns that create a language. Yeah, that's a great idea. If I had more time, and yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And then she also had a burning question. She said, do you think it was you in the past life, or have you had karma with this person that you were completing with him? And so I think she's referring to the gentleman that you channeled for your book.
Yeah, sometimes I thought I was maybe him. Sometimes I thought I was his love interest, who is a dancer, and I love to dance. I was really curious about that, but it sure felt that writing the book completed something. My life shifted after I wrote it, and I really feel very strongly that writing gives us that opportunity. Anyone can do that, and that opportunity to complete things and to heal ourselves. But thank you for that question. Great question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for being here, Sarah. It's great to see you here. So, any other questions, Michelle, or with this? And Lisa, I'm very curious, is your Lisa Smartt, that is such a great name. Is that your birth name or married name, or when
it was my married name, and I've actually remarried, but my publisher said, keep it. It's such a good name. You don't want to confuse people.
Yeah.
And
it's 2T, just in case they didn't get it on the first T. So you're not just smart, you're smart.
Smarter.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Lisa. I'm really, I'm so excited. I think that we learned so much, and
thank you.
And tons of comments and things like that. And when your musical starts coming out, we'd love to have you back to talk more about all that. And maybe people will have a field trip, and everyone can come see it.
Oh, that would be a great idea.
That would be good. If you need a director, call me.
I will, Michelle. I'd love it.
So, well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you, Debra. Great to meet you. And thank you, everyone. Yeah. May your words all be blessed, truly. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh my gosh.
That was premature.
So I was like sitting here like, wait, we're not done.
We're not done. I know. I gave the cut. And so he's like, okay, push the button. And then, yeah, it's a learning curve. So
it was so funny. I was like, we're not done. But I am making dinner downstairs. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go check on that. But
no, you don't look like you're making dinner downstairs.
Well, it's cooking. I mean, there's not too much for me to do while it's in the oven, but
Ah,
I'm getting a little hungry.
oh,
But we still have more to talk about.
we for sure have more. First of all, Lisa Smartt,
You were right.
like,
You were
right?
absolutely
Oh my
right. I
God.
thought you were, sometimes you exaggerate, so I wasn't
Me?
sure.
No, I never exaggerate.
Just a little bit, but that was no exaggeration. She was so cool. And it is hard to come on an interview when you've done a study and you really want to like get the names right and dates and everything. That's a lot harder than just talking about whatever. So she did a really good job, and yeah, I'm really excited to follow up on some of those sources that she, what was his
And
name?
by the way, before you came on, we were talking, and she is very interested in where you got your PhD. And so she knows a lot of the same people. So she wants to talk to you offline about that. So, yeah. So I figured you would want to talk to her for sure. So
Yeah,
I
I might not have the nicest things to say, so it's good that it's going to be offline.
It'll be offline. I kind of gave her a little tasty poo about it. So, but I think, I told everybody that there was a little something an experiment that you did. And I am very, very interested. I'd like to hear it twice. So if you can, tell, and then we'll close out the show. And before anyone leaves, we really need people to subscribe. So just click that subscribe button and even the little bell. And that will kind of remind you when the show starts. And, but yeah, thank you. So it's very helpful to us. It doesn't cost money to subscribe. Just click it and forget about it. So, yeah, so Deb.
Yeah, and I'll tell this story, but then I also want to share. I don't know, Michelle, did I share with you what one of my students did as far as a spirit drawing? Did I share that with you?
Yes.
Oh, on that other show that we were on. Will there be a way for me to share this image? Because I'll talk about that
Yeah,
next.
I'm thinking, yeah, we should be able to send it to, I'm gonna message you the email to send it to.
Okay.
And then our producer, Adam, will shoot it up on the screen.
Okay. Just tell Adam, like, don't show it until we're ready to show it, because I want to give some background
You
on
mean
it.
like how he prematurely pushed the wrong button? No.
Yes. I think he was ready to go to dinner too. Hang on just a second, though, because I've kind of lost track of the screen and where you are. Gosh, where are you? Oh, there you are. All right. Well, so this was an experiment I did, and it's kind of tacky and kind of inappropriate, but I did tell my mom, and I think I told my brother afterwards, but it's still, it's a little bit cringeworthy that I did this. But, what else are you going to do when you're in a hospital room with someone who is on life support and, you're just sitting around like you've been told, okay, we're going to take him off of life support, and we're not sure how long it's going to take for him to pass, but he's definitely going to pass. And I'll back up a little bit. This was my mother's father, my stepfather. He just passed away last week, and he had double pneumonia. He had gotten sick, was sick for a few days, and then he had harder and harder time breathing. They brought him into ICU, put him on life support. He's had leukemia for like 20 years. It's been okay, but just recently, he had recently been told he was going to have to go on chemo. So things were already going downhill with that. So when he had his double pneumonia, it was pretty clear that his white cell count was just like off the charts and wasn't going to get better. So he was lying there, and the whole time, from the time I came in, he had like tubes in his mouth and stuff, but even with that, they had him sedated the whole time. He never woke up, so we never got any last words or anything like that. But he looked, as peaceful as one could in that situation. And so I was standing there, and they had just taken, hospice had come in. They said, we don't know how long this is going to take before he actually passes. They still had a little oxygen going into his nose, but they took off like almost everything else. He had had so much connected to him. And so we're just waiting and to see what's going to happen, basically. And, looking at his heart rate, his heart rate was starting to drop, and his oxygen rate. And at that point, I thought, well, I have some apps on my phone that I would use for paranormal ghost hunting. And I wonder if at this moment, because we're about to see him transition, most likely would the equipment pick up on this moment. So I took out my phone, and I used my Ghost Tube app. And that's Ghost Tube, TUBE. And there's some versions of it. I think it's the
SLS.
SLS version. And this is pretty cool. So I'll backtrack with a little story. The first time I learned about this, my friend Theon and I were in St. Augustine with Josh Lewis. We were doing that was a weekend we were doing a paranormal workshop. And right before the workshop, Than and I went to this old jail in what did I just say the place was?
Augustine.
St. Augustine. And so we're at this old jail, and she's telling me about this app. And the app is so cool because you point it at somebody, and then you see it's like a stick figure lit up in green. Like it'll show like the arms and legs and head. And so anytime you point the camera at a person, you'll see them as green, and you do this in the dark. So Than and I could see each other on the camera and anyone who walked in and out. But we went into this one little cell where there was just these two bunk beds. Nobody else was in the room except her and I. And, we're pointing the camera, and it's just black unless you point it at an actual person. And the room is black. And then suddenly you see a third figure. And we're standing in the doorway. No one else could get in that little cell with us. And there's only one door. And we see a figure light up on the bottom bed. And then we see it go up like where the ladder is. And it goes to the top of the bed. And it's like sitting down. So now we're in the room, me and her, no other humans. And a figure is showing up on this app on the top bed. So this was very, very cool. So anyway, back to the story of being in the hospital room with my stepfather who is passing away. And so I'm pointing the camera because the idea was, will we see like his spirit go up, or will we see other spirits show up on this app? And I just happened to pull it out at the moment when he passed. And there is a record button. And as cheesy as it was, I hit the record button. So I actually recorded like him passing. And, but you know what? I did not see, I saw my mother standing there and her lit up with the green stick figure superimposed on her. There was a nurse leaning over the bed. She showed up. And no, there was, nothing else. And I was like, okay, well, good effort. But no, I didn't see anything. And then maybe like a few hours later, it dawned on me, there was my mother showing up, there was the nurse, but the dying person, he didn't show up. Like he never showed up. He when he was alive, there was no green figure on him. And after he passed, there wasn't. Like that would have been interesting if there had been. And then when he passed, there wasn't. He just never showed up at all. And so this made me think, well, maybe this is telling us that like his spirit was already gone even before everything, registered that he was dead. His vitals were still there, but whatever it is that shows up on this app or causes it to show up, that was not there. So that is one theory. However, I do have to say, because I thought, wow, we've just discovered something really amazing here. And it is possible. However, we really need to, and it shouldn't be hard to research this app. And I should have done that already a long time ago, is to see like what exactly is the app measuring. And my friend Rick, who I had a short conversation with, now Rick is a longtime parapsychologist, Rick Berger, and he worked with Charles Honorton, who invented the Ganzfeld, and Rick invented the auto Ganzfeld, which is a machine or a procedure used in parapsychology for many decades. So Rick is really smart. And so we were on Zoom the other day, and I was telling him this story, and I showed him, and I wish I don't know where my phone is right now, but I wish I could show it to you what it looked like, the green person on there. And when I put it up to the camera, he said he saw that the green first, like when it registered on his eyes, because I had it pointed on him, he said it started with the eyes and then it spread through the body. So he was like, well, maybe your stepfather had his eyes closed the whole time, and maybe this won't register on someone if they have their eyes closed. Now that would be easy enough to check too. We just haven't done enough experiments with it. And Michelle, we were talking about that, and now I'm remembering. I said, could you take some pictures of your kids when they're sleeping and see what happens? Did you have a chance to do that yet?
No,
Is
no,
anyone asleep at your house right now? Probably not.
no,
They stay
they're
really.
still up. Well, it's only 8:46 here.
Oh, okay.
So.
Way too early for them. But yeah, if anyone is anyone who's listening, if anyone is here listening and has tried out the GhostTube SLS, let us know. And I just saw a message from Henry. Henry's part of a remote viewing study we're doing, and darn, I was supposed to send everyone their feedback photo, and it was already Tuesday and I haven't sent it yet. As soon as we're done here, as soon as I finish dinner, you will get your feedback. But you know what? Actually, I take that back, because I can't send the feedback. What happens is I have to wait till every viewer in the project, and we have 20 right now. And also I see a couple other people here who are in it. We cannot send the feedback until all 20 sessions are in, and I got the final one today. And so once I get those, I send that to my co-researcher, Da Ching, and then he sends me the feedback. So gonna need to do that.
Did you send the picture? Did you send the picture
of Dale? And well, the picture I was going to say, oh, okay, let me do that, because we're talking about many topics.
Yeah, I think people want to go to bed soon too.
Okay, so so now I have another story, and I have to send this though. So where were you going to send me the link? Because I'm not.
I sent it in the private chat.
Okay, private chat. So I am going to send this right now.
Lucas can stay up all night. Some of it was really late.
Okay, great.
Who?
We could have Lucas come on while we go to bed.
I think Henry's team Michelle.
Okay, so I just sent this to our producer. So the next thing I was going to talk about was, so maybe like about 5 days or so after my stepfather passed away, I was teaching my mediumship class, and I'm always looking for opportunities with my classes to have actual, people for mediumship, actual people that passed away for the students to tune into. And I thought, what a great opportunity. I'm still at my mom's house, and this was someone I was close to. And so I had my students, there were about 8 of them, and we pretty much said, okay, we're going to do a seance all together here. And all I told them was, his name and that he was my stepfather. And they did just an incredible they did an incredible reading. Every single thing they said was absolutely spot on, describing what he was like, his personality, his behaviors, everything. And I've been teaching them how to sketch and do some artwork around when they're tuning into spirits. And one of my students, Angela, she sent me a photo, or she sent me a sketch, and this is what I want to show you. She sent me a sketch and it was in black and white.
I'm looking at it right now. Like,
yeah,
I can't.
It was in black and white, and it was like pretty darn good. And I wrote her back and I said, can you just add color to this? Like, hoping, it was a toss up, because it's like, okay, is she going to get the colors correct too? But I just had a feeling she should add color. So I didn't tell her anything else. I just said, you're on track, just add color and send it back to me. And she did. And I'm going to show you, and hopefully she won't mind that I'm sharing this. She said she's had other examples like this too. So I'm really excited to hope to get those from her soon. And maybe we can have her on the show too, because she's beyond studying with me. She's studied mediumship else for a long time elsewhere as well. So are you ready to show this? So again, she sent this to me before she knew what Dale looked like, or she'd never seen him before. And so I found a picture that where he was smiling. I just went around the house and looked for any picture I could find where he was smiling, because she drew him smiling. And this is what we got. Can you show it?
Dramatic effect. Oh no. Technical. Wait.
Well, and I'll add one other thing.
Yeah, keep talking.
Yeah. So after this,
I never thought I'd say keep talking.
The next morning, I woke up and I heard a voice, and the voice said, "I'm here with Miriam." And now it didn't sound like Dale's voice. It was just like words in my head, but it was very clear. I'm here with Miriam. And I was like, who's Miriam? So I went downstairs and I said to my mother, who's Miriam? And she said, Miriam, she was her other boyfriend before Dale, his sister, who she was extremely close with. And she said she's been thinking about Miriam like constantly, because they were so close, and Miriam had said some things to her that were really relevant to her right now. And so she was like, yeah, I just miss her more than anyone else who's passed away. So, not positive, but I do think that it was very likely Dale saying that he was with her friend. Okay, and here we go. I even have another picture that's even closer than this of Dale with his mouth open, but this is a pretty darn good match, I would say. Look at that, like the chin, the eyes, the nose.
Yeah, it's like freaky.
Yeah.
That's freaky deep. For sure.
Yeah. Isn't that good? And
was it a female? A she? Because I didn't know. She is a good artist too.
Oh, Angela. Yeah, Angela. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like it does take some degree of artistic talent to do one of these pictures, but you don't have to be like a fantastic artist. So oftentimes, whether we're talking about mediums or remote viewers, they are getting like, some really clear imagery, but not everyone has the ability to put it into this form. And then as we've talked about in other interviews, like what I'll do is I'll just ask my subconscious at some point during my session to give me an image of a famous actor or a famous person that I could then go look up their image and, match it to later on it could be matched to a person. But it's so nice when you have someone like this who both is getting, clairvoyant visions, and then also able to really get it onto the paper. And several of the students said like they saw him with flannel shirts, like red flannel shirts. And I hadn't really ever seen him wearing a red flannel shirt, but I was looking through his closet the other day and he has like 10 flannel shirts in there. And yeah, they were just so spot on. So yeah, this was exciting. And I was a little nervous about telling my mom about this, both, what I did in the hospital and then also, having my students tune in. And I showed this picture to my brother well before I showed it to my mother because I just didn't know. And so we were sitting at the kitchen table and I was like, Mom, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but I just want you to know, of course I, had to have my students tune in and my student, one of my students, Angela, did this sketch and I want you to see it. And she was like, oh, okay. And then I showed it to her on my phone and like, she just went like, it was like freaked out, but not mad. It was like, she was like,
It
oh my
is
God,
freaky.
oh my
Like it is.
yeah, and my mom fluctuates between like, if you catch her on one day, she'll be like, yeah, I don't believe in an afterlife, and on another day she might say yes. But I really think that this helped her, put her over the edge. And when we went to the funeral home to pick up the ashes, that was another thing. Like we had already been to the funeral home and they said he was going to be cremated and we'd come to get the ashes. And when we went there, the lady walked us in and she's about to go in the room where the ashes are. And she's like, do you want a couple minutes by yourself? And my mom and I like looked at each other and we're like, why do we need a couple minutes? Like, we've already been through that. We're just picking this up. But then like the second we saw the urn, my mom like just, freaked.
Yeah.
She's like, oh my God, like Dale's in a jar. Like, how do I handle the thought that like my husband's in this little jar? And I said, Mom, like, remember that picture? He is not in the jar, like there are some little remains of his physical body is in the jar, but just keep seeing him as, a big spirit out here because he is alive and well and not in that jar. And, it is such a bizarre concept, but, getting back to why we wanted to have this guest here today, talking about these final words and why these topics are important is because, we need to, have help with how we think about these things in death and, these.
Can you tell everyone about like a little sneak peek at some of the shows that we're working on?
Yeah, that's a good idea. And so let's see if I can remember. Well, we're going to have one on ASMR.
ASMR.
And do you know what ASMR stands for?
No.
I should probably make sure you know the answers before I ask you these questions.
It's okay.
Does anyone listening know what ASMR stands for? I'm going to look it up. Now we know what it is.
Our producer is looking it up.
Okay.
Our producer is looking it up. He's going to save the day. Okay. I know it's like brain tickles. And there's a guy that wrote a book called Brain Tickles, and we're going to see if we can get him on the show. And then we're going to maybe attempt to do some ASMR with you guys.
We could do some like right now as a preview. So
no, not now.
Like even just like tapping.
That doesn't sound very good.
You need to do it on a microphone.
Yeah.
Like we will have to upgrade our microphones to do
We're
it.
going to do another show on walk-ins and what was the other? Time travelers. Time travelers and walk-ins. We're going to do on robots and the ever popular nudists.
Yes, we're still in search of nudists. If anyone is here. If you know any nudists, and it can't just be you taking your clothes off, it's got to be someone who's like lived the nudist lifestyle. Then let us know. We're looking for, and maybe we can have more than one nudist on. But yeah, we wanted.
I don't know if I can handle more than one nudist on. Okay.
Are they going to be naked when they're on? Like, could we do that? Are there any rules against having like a naked person?
We'll look into it. We'll have to ask producer Adam.
That would
Oh, don't get so excited.
gosh, that would be so.
Do not get excited,
crazy.
Misty. No, calm down.
Yes, they have to be naked. They do. They have to be naked.
I'm sure there's sensors, for sure. Oh,
No, I
Diane.
don't know. Are there like? So could someone find that out too, or ask our producer if it's going to go on YouTube? Like, do they have
we'll look into it. Yeah. So So again, we can't say enough. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. You know, we're having a blast. We love the connection that we're having with you, building a small community with you guys, and just continuing to get really good and fun content, because life is just, you know what, we need to laugh a lot more than we do. And the two of us laugh a lot. And so it's really,
and this really does feel like a party when we have our friends showing up here. So far,
for sure.
About everybody, and yeah, we appreciate you guys hanging out. I wish we could hear and see everybody too. And
that will be level 2. We'll get to that for sure.
Yeah.
One thing at a time. But we're gonna sign out. I'm saying goodbye from Michelle.
So it's bye for real this time.
That's it, producer Adam.